Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime Guru. Just a reminder to please subscribe. Subscribing helps support the channel and what we are trying to accomplish. It will also ensure that you do not miss out on any new content. I also ask that you please follow the channel on all social media platforms. That way you can get important updates and information about how you can help out with these cases. Today's case was the hardest to put together thus far, and that is because there is so little information out there about it. However, there was enough to put an episode together, but you may have realized that today's episode is a little shorter than most. Regardless, I feel like the less information there is, the more important the case is worth talking about. With that being said, today I am talking about the seemingly random shooting death of Ernesto Gonzalez Acosta, which occurred on February 10th, 2013. Over a decade has passed, and Ernesto's murder is still unsolved, and his family is desperately trying to make sure that he will not be forgotten. San Francisco is the fourth largest city in California, and it is a popular tourist destination for its beautiful scenery, trendy bars, shops, and restaurants, and of course, the stately Golden Gate Bridge. It was also the home of 23-year-old San Francisco City College student Ernesto Acosta, or Z, which he commonly went by. And I apologize if I am not pronouncing that correctly. However, Z is the only pronunciation I was able to find. If there is a more proper way to pronounce that, please feel free to correct me. And since he went by Z more commonly than Ernesto, I will refer to him as such throughout most of this episode. It was the wee hours of the morning on February 10th, 2013. When Z was walking from his home to his friend's home so that he could return some items to her that he had. Z lived in the Western Addition neighborhood, which was a part of a slightly bigger neighborhood known as Hayes Valley. He was just minding his own business, walking down the street like any normal person, until he got to the intersection of Hayes and Webster Streets. This is when a car pulls up and shoots Z once in the chest and then speeds away. Officers arrived around 2 a.m. and Ernesto was rushed to a hospital, where he would later succumb to the fatal chest wound. Since this was such a seemingly random act of violence, the San Francisco PD did not have a whole lot to go on initially. However, they would be able to quickly rule out that Z was targeted specifically, because they would come to learn that he was not your typical drive-by victim. Ernesto Gonzalez Acosta was born on Veterans Day in 1989 and grew up in Clovis, California, as well as the Fresno area. He came from a pretty large family of 7 kids. He had 2 brothers and 4 sisters, which included a twin sister named Nani. Z was described as a free spirit, and you can really get that impression from just looking at him. He fell in love with exploring his indigenous Aztec roots and was involved in many organizations, such as the People Organized to Win Employment Rights Organization, or POWER. He would use these organizations to help spread awareness and educate people about Aztec culture. A woman told Marta Franco with missionlocal.org that Ernesto and his father had actually taught her children about the Aztec calendar, and that the family as a whole were very kind people dedicated to giving back to the community. Even in his short life, Z managed to accomplish some of his goals, such as owning a Volkswagen bus and traveling to Brazil. It's really sad to think about what all he could have done had he not been taken so soon and so senselessly. I read a lot of comments on news articles, Reddit, and Facebook, and I did not see one negative comment about Z. Even people he was only acquainted with or who knew him in passing all said that he was a very chill, laid-back, and friendly guy. His coworkers and even patrons at the Whole Foods where he worked all seemed to love him as well. So it's difficult to imagine how such a kind, promising young man was taken in such a cold manner. And that's what police were struggling with as well. Ernesto was not involved in any criminal activity or had any prior arrests. They would also come to find that he had no known enemies that would want to do him harm. Officer Albie Esparza told Vivian Ho with SF Gate, quote, "It was a senseless, cold-blooded murder for no apparent reason," end quote. And because this was so random, it would be statistically so much harder to solve. They were not left without any leads, though. About 2 months after Z's murder, surveillance footage from a liquor store and a cab that was passing by was released to the media. I would have liked to have shared the actual video with you guys, but as far as I can tell, it is no longer publicly available. There was a faint image of a vehicle, which is described as a white Lexus ES. In the video, you can see the car pulling up to Ernesto, who was just veering off the sidewalk a little bit. Apparently, it seemed almost as if the driver had called Z over before shooting him, which makes me curious as to what he may have said. The only lead that this video drummed up was some witnesses who said they saw a similar vehicle at a club called Yoshi's, where a large birthday celebration was taking place and the rapper The Game was performing. It was reported that there was an incident at this party that was described as a brawl. I tried to find some more information about what exactly took place, but other than articles about Z's murder, it was not reported elsewhere. After all, bar fights are not exactly newsworthy. These witnesses did not have a physical description of the owner of the vehicle or any other details. And unfortunately, this lead did not bring forward any more information. Several days after the murder, friends and family of Z held a memorial at the intersection of the shooting, which included prayer and traditional Mexican music, just as Z would have loved. Ernesto was laid to rest back in his hometown of Clovis on February 18th. When the murder first occurred and when the surveillance footage was released, there was a fair amount of media coverage, but it quickly faded. A year later, Z's twin sister Nani, who is still strongly advocating for justice today, reached out to the San Francisco Examiner, pleading for some attention on her brother's unsolved case. This did draw up a few articles, but after 2014, the media would be radio silent about Z's murder. The case seems to have gone ice cold as well, with no apparent investigation taking place. I wanted to know more about the area of San Francisco that Z was killed in. From what I could tell, the Western Addition Hayes Valley neighborhood is a hip, trendy area of the city that attracts a lot of young millennials for its bars and shops. Locals have said that for the last 20 years or so, it has been a pretty safe place to live. It was a little rougher in the 90s, but has since cleaned up, which I'm sure that the skyrocketing cost of living in San Francisco, as well as gentrification, have played a role in. Now, I'm not from or familiar with San Francisco, so if you are from the area, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I did get the impression that the Hayes Valley neighborhood is adjacent to some more crime-heavy areas. But despite what I read, I did find some other shooting-related homicides in the Hayes Valley neighborhood from around the same time. Just 2 months before Z's murder, in December of 2012, a 24-year-old man named Byron Beasley was shot and killed at the 700 block of Grove Street, which is just 2 blocks away from the intersection where Z was killed. According to the San Francisco Examiner, the suspect in Byron's murder may have been driving a white vehicle. Now, this could have been any white vehicle, if it was a white vehicle at all, not necessarily the white Lexus that was involved in Z's murder. However, I did find that to be an interesting detail. As far as I can tell, Byron's murder is also unsolved, and there was even less media coverage about his homicide. And just a month before this shooting, there was a 52-year-old bystander that was killed in the crossfire at the 500 block of Grove Street. In addition, there was another shooting in October of 2013 that left one person dead and two wounded, that also took place in Hayes Valley. There was also a quadruple shooting homicide in 2015. Clearly, the Hayes Valley neighborhood is no stranger to gun violence. But after doing some research, I surprisingly found that San Francisco as a whole, for a big city, has a relatively low homicide rate, at least within the last decade. A reporter with CBS Bay Area, Wilson Walker, did some reporting on homicides in San Francisco between 2012 and 2019. During that time period, there were an average of 52 homicides per year in San Francisco. And in 2013 specifically, there were 48, which was a major drop from the 69 that were in 2012. And considering that in 2013, San Francisco had a population of around 840,000, that is a pretty low number. Of the 48 murders in 2013, 26 of those were solved or cleared, which was 54% of the homicides that year, while the national average of cleared homicides in 2013 was 48%. And it seems that San Francisco has consistently stayed above the national average in cleared homicides. Wilson reported that San Francisco has maintained a 75% clearance rate, while the national average is 52%. With the SFPD clearing about half the homicides that take place, I have to wonder what it is about this Hayes Valley neighborhood that causes these shootings to remain unsolved. From my research, I found that the department is made up of 10 separate districts. Ernesto and the others that I found were all murdered in the Northern District. I really wanted to find some more comprehensive numbers of how many officers and detectives were in each district, but unfortunately that data was not available. However, there are a total of 2,140 officers that make up the San Francisco police force. And if you divided those evenly between the 10 districts, which of course I'm sure is not the case, that would be 214 officers per district. I'd be really interested to know what the actual numbers are, though, because from what I've seen in other cities, the districts with the most unsolved homicides usually have the least amount of law enforcement allocated. Without the numbers, this is completely speculative and I can't know for sure, but it could very well be that the Northern District of San Francisco has less detectives dedicated to solving these crimes. Regardless of the statistics, Z's and several other murders remain unsolved. To me, Z's murder seems like a classic case of mistaken identity. I'd really like to know more about what happened at this so-called brawl at Yoshi's. The bar is only a half a mile away from the crime scene, so I have to wonder if whoever was involved in this fight may have left the scene riled up and looking for the other participants. Perhaps Ernesto looked like one of the people involved in this fight, and that's why the killer shot him. Of course, this is complete speculation, but it is the only explanation I can come up with for this senseless crime. Nearly 11 years have passed since Ernesto Z. Acosta was murdered in cold blood while simply walking down the street. His twin sister Nani and the rest of his loved ones continue to fight for justice and honor Z in every way they can. I've included a YouTube video in the episode description of a song that a friend of Z's made dedicated to him, and I highly encourage you check it out. Coworkers at the Whole Foods where Ernesto worked planted a tree in the parking lot in his memory, and the organizations that he was involved in continue on Z's work in educating people on Aztec culture. Z touched so many lives, and even though he is gone, he is far from being forgotten. If you have any information about the murder of Ernesto Gonzalez Acosta or the murder of Byron Beasley, Specifically, if you have any information about this fight that took place at Yoshi's on February 10th, 2013, you can call the San Francisco Police Department at 415-553-1145. Or you can call anonymously at 415-575-4444. You can also text TIP 411, starting your message with SFPD. Thank you everyone for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and make sure that you subscribe. I also ask that you please follow the channel on all social media platforms. If you have a case in mind that you think I should cover, please email me at truecrimeguruchannel@gmail.com or feel free to reach out to me on social media.